you dumb down the whole idea of metrics, and so then you start to chase a number or information under the umbrella, I guess, as you may do with other HR programs. Well, that's our metric. We were talking about it relative to, I'm a top employer and that's our metric, so I get to check the box without actually measuring whether that has an impact or a consequence, but it sounds appealing. So certainly a core value of my organization is to be very aware of the cost pressures and to be able to demonstrate. Your success is judged on a variety of things, but in large part it's being knowledgeable about the programs that you run, to be able to demonstrate not only are they competitive, but to understand what the costs are and are they sustainable. So it's not even just looking at what those costs and expenses are this year, but understanding the trends and the information and costs underneath that are going to be perhaps a great consequence years from now.
I had a previous boss who was not that familiar with what HR did and what HR didn't do, and so he never considered the fact that I wouldn't read the P&L. It was just an expectation. And when I said, well, I'm not quite sure what this means, I'm not sure what this term means, he said, well, get with the CFO, that's what they're there for. They explain this to business leaders all the time. And he put the category as business leaders. And as a business leader, whether it was the GM, whether it was the HR person, whether it was the CIO, there is an expectation that you will understand what are the key drivers for this organization and how are we going to make money. And for me, that really started to play out with executive compensation and with just compensation in general. We wanted to build bonus programs and incentive programs that tied very much to the key business metrics. And whether that was return on capital employed, whether it was gross margin, whether it was EBITDA. And so you had to get very familiar with those terms. And that was something that I spent time with my team on, is part of every HR meeting, we have a weekly meeting, is, okay, how are we doing? What's going on as a company? What are we doing? Is anyone aware? Where's the oil and gas price at? What's happening with exploration? What's that going to mean for us? And just having those discussions, because I think often we think, you get busy doing your work and you forget that there's this whole environment that we have to do the work in, and we have to stay competitive and aware of what's going on there. HR has been looking for new and exotic ways to measure themselves instead of going back to the tried and true. What is the measure for the CEO? What's the measure for the shareholder? Like, what are stakeholders really looking at? And they're looking at, how's the company doing? Is it financially viable? One of the challenges, I don't think very many HR people actually get the fundamentals of finance when they need to get them, and that is early on in your career. Early on in the career, understanding some of the basics of finance and accounting, whether that's a course you take or whether it's sitting down with a controller or somebody else who knows the business well, and just understanding what even the definitions mean, because I think sometimes it looks like a very exotic foreign language, and really this is how businesses are run, and so we should all be able to be conversant in the basics of that. I think one of the things that's important is learning what the P&L drivers are for your particular business. As you changed industries, as HR people often do, those drivers for businesses change. And I remember, working in one industry where, the absolute most key thing was gross margin. 6%, 6%, 6%, that's what we need, EBIT. And they always talk about EBIT or gross margin. Going to the next organization and wanting to focus on that, okay, well, what's our EBIT? And then saying to me, that's not a relevant measure at all. We use return on capital employed, and that's really going to be the big driver for our business. And me having to take a step back and realize, okay, there's different business drivers on P&Ls. I don't think I realized that. I thought it was always going to be the same thing. It always has to be profit, or it always has to be this. Taking the time to understand from the business leaders, okay, this is what the industry measures us on, this is what analysts measure us on, this is what shareholders measure us on, and understanding what goes into those drivers and how those reflect on the health of the business.